So working okay, Paul, yeah. I've got it on. Okay. Yeah, it's on, yeah. Cool.
Okay, so
We
let's
good?
continue. The next presentation is going to be given by Tom Workinshaw from Alba Hospital. And he's going to talk about how to grow the PocketCube movement and removing barriers to entry.
Thanks, Alessandra. All good? Cool. Yeah, cool. Let's crack on then. I'm sure some people know me. Tom, I started and run Alba Orbital. We built PocketCubes, as you probably guessed. And yeah, I thought maybe I'd just try and, we've obviously done a few talks and we don't want to obviously saturate the event with just Alba related event, stuff. But yeah, my talk's more about maybe just like general barriers to adoption of PocketCubes in sort of more mainstream sort of circles. It's still very niche and very fringe in sort of the space world, and you know, some people maybe have heard of it and said, oh, that's cool, but you know, come back to me when it can do something and things like that. So this is more about some suggestions about what we can do collectively as a kind of a Q&A to try and we just remove as many sort of the either real world problems or actually perceived problems and how we maybe go about doing that. Yeah, so thanks for coming. I mean, like, it sounds like super trivial, but like having a workshop is like really good for the Q&A. I mean, it's like sounds super obvious, but like you know, let's start with the simple stuff, like, you know, show up, chat, discuss things, move on. So yeah, I'm not really talking about Alba, but if you're interested in working at Alba, then send me your CV. We just hired someone from the ESAT team, the Spanish guys, so that's really cool that we now have people joining Alba who've worked on other PocketCubes, so that's really cool. Yeah, really the mission of the company, sort of playing to a home crowd here probably, but yeah, really wanted to advance the Pocket cause. I mean, we often get asked, well, why didn't you just build CubeSats? And I mean, the way I kind of look at it is like it's like hundreds of people doing CubeSats, and that's cool. And you know, there's a lot of people with like decades worth of experience doing that. And as a new company, we want to be on the next wave, and you can actually kind of do interesting things now on PocketCubes for the first time. And we're trying to drive a lot of that forward. And we don't really want to be like, you know, the 100th best CubeSat company. We want to be like the first PocketCube company, and it'd be great to have more competition. You know, it'd be really cool. And really for it to matter, right? I mean, there's no point being the big fish in a little pond if the pond's tiny. You want to grow everything, right? I mean, it helps everyone, so. So yeah, PocketCubes. So why are we so interested in PocketCubes and why do we care about it and why have I spent 5 years of my life doing it, I guess? I mean, really just like getting more things in space, I think, you know, the more agile you can make things, the more things move forward quickly. And PocketCubes are kind of like a tool which allows you to fail, and failure is actually really important for any sort of tech movement. You know, if you had to write codes on the internet and you could only have one shot at it and it had to be perfect, then there wouldn't be any websites, right? So. So yeah, so that's why PocketCubes for Alba, and I don't really see us deviating. I mean, I think we'll do more of the value chain, like maybe applications, and we're doing launch now, and maybe other services around that. But it will always be with a PocketCube focus for sure. There's a bit of a dark period. I mean, so I think I'm the only person who's actually been to every PocketCube workshop, which is kind of I don't know if that's good or me or sad or whatnot. But there was one in 2014 in the US. There's actually two technically, but they were part of the same series. And then there was really nothing for 3 years, which was kind of quite sad because I was running a Pocket company. I think it's the only Pocket company in the world at that point. And it was like, I think we were like 2 people. So it's really like not a fun place to be. So it's really on the sort of the edge of it all. So obviously we don't want to have like, you know, go long periods without like meeting up and chatting and discussing things and sharing sort of knowledge and progress and things. And there was really a dark period, in my opinion, that shouldn't really be repeated. So now hopefully we'll have annual ones here. The mechanical standards, so it's like, I think it was last year's talking point, or certainly like when you run into people, it's like one of the things people talk about. So I believe is a grade now. I think we're like still like, there's some nuances of the ICD we're still trying to like flesh out. But I mean, broadly all the dimensions are great, everyone's happy. I don't know, Sylvana's here who's been leading all that on the Delft side, and I think Chantal's coming as well. So, but basically we were trying to make sure that people who are building pods at least like all agree on what PodCube is, dimensions, and we can publish that. And you know, we're sort of calling it the open PodCube standard because we want to make sure that there's no deviation mechanically, because there's been a lot of, you know, issues on that front, let's say. So things are moving a lot quicker on that front, which is really good. And that was really one of the big blockers, I think, for PodCube adoption. Okay, so yeah, so challenges geography. I mean, this might seem a bit random, right? Given we're all largely European, although we have people from outside Europe, which is great. Thanks for coming. So we're very European-centric, which is cool because, like, in one way, it means like we can all meet up for a workshop in Delft, and we can, like, you know, that's cool. But obviously, we don't want to just be a European-centric thing. And like, why is it European-centric? I mean, I think it's largely because Alana in the US in the US, if you want to fly a university mission, you don't have to pay for your upmass. So essentially, you can build a 1U or a 6U, and it costs the same because you get a free lunch. So you're not really penalised like at market rates for doing a bigger satellite. I mean, it costs the same in bits largely, and maybe a few thousand more in your cells or something for your solar panel. But there's really a market failure with Alana, and that really kind of screws PodCubes up in the US a lot, I think, for education. And we're not part of that because PodCubes aren't like recognised on that program. And you know, we've invited people from Alana to come, and they don't respond. So, if you know, should we try and push for that? Should we not? Who cares? You know, is that a big deal? Should there be a European version of that? Should we push for that? You know, we'll see. I mean, the good news in Europe is like the density of teams is getting bigger. So like every major country has a PodCube team now at least, and that means you can meet up and chat and discuss ideas, which then creates the flywheel spinning. We're about 10 teams I reckon about just now in Europe, sort of seriously like building things. And just like how do we get that from about 10 to 100? That's kind of a big challenge. And like Emerald was saying earlier with Vector, obviously like launch rate, it's kind of chicken and egg. People don't want to launch unless they know there's a launch, but people who put on the launch services need to know there's enough demand to launch, and it's this kind of, if no one kind of breaks the chicken and egg cycle, there is nothing essentially. So it's, you know, it's one of those challenges. So awareness is in our region, so it's cool that we're doing this here and everyone showed up and we're sold out, and that's great. I mean, should we start looking at other regions? So we're starting to get quite a lot of interest in Asia. We've sort of been talking with NUS. I mean, they were chatting about sending someone, I don't know if they did or not in the end. Potentially in Singapore, like sort of middle of this year rather, July time. So we're sort of mulling that. So if anybody's interested, maybe either going or talking, maybe like a one-day event in US to try a National Uni Singapore to try and spread the word. And there's a few teams in the region now, and if they could kind of meet up, maybe that would help spur interest in that part of the world. So I think that's kind of the way that we can kind of help move it out of just Europe, because Asia has the same problems that Europe does in terms of cheap, easy to launch satellites, essentially. So I don't want to sort of duplicate too much previous talks, so I'm not sure exactly what was covered there and what wasn't, but you know, launch is the problem, right? I mean, everyone's like, you know, this would be really cool, like, you know, get a satellite and then we go buy launch and then everything's sorted and we launch and we try and we fail. I mean, we've been waiting a long time in Unicorn 1, and it's, you know, we kind of just sort of, you know, realized we're just going to have to do it ourselves. So we have the pod outside, so that's the flight pod, or assuming it's like everything's as we expect, it should be the flight pod. It's not fully built up. The springs mechanism is not fully done, and Andrew's going to talk more about it tomorrow for Alba. But yeah, so we have the Alba pod that we've been doing. We developed that with ESA, and that's now available, and we're going to fly that on the Vector launch later this year. It's Delphi PQ, not the PQ one, so not an updated slide there. But yeah, basically we're flying one of our Unicorn 2s, and Delphi are flying one of their Delphi PQs. Quite a big deal. It's a dedicated PodCube launch. I mean, it kind of is because it's a test launch, but I think it's still pretty cool that we're like the primary customer for the first time. So, so yeah, that's pretty cool. And it's first flight of AlbaPod, and really AlbaPod, like, you kind of need pods and companies wanting to launch stuff to allow people to then do their missions. It's kind of, but there needs to be enough demand. It's kind of chicken and egg. So yeah, I don't want to sort of just repeat what Andrew said or Emerald said. So cluster one's happened this year, or whenever Vector launched their first rocket, orbital rocket. We're on the first one. So second cluster, this probably covers a lot of what Andrew said. We actually, I think, have 3 customers now signed up. I think we're about 4P, so like 2 1Ps and a 2P, paid deposits, 10% deposits. And really, these 2 vehicles we're kind of interested in, PSOV and Electron. We were steering towards PSOV because obviously they're quite cheap and that's great, but we started signing up American customers. So then that creates a whole bunch of issues around how do you get a US-owned satellite to India. Like it turns out you need to like hire a lawyer basically. So so we were like, that's kind of the 2 we're on just now, and it's a new process for us. So we're maybe going to steer more towards the US option, but that's what we're looking at. And the pricing is like commercial rates. I mean, like this is like would be sustainable if we can hit maybe 4 or 5 customers per launch to sort of break even. So yeah, the first one's like we're just doing it like well below cost to get us in orbit and get something happening. And the second one we're trying to sort of cover ourselves and try and sort of prove that it's a real business. That'd be really cool. And yes, MOU and deposit would get you on that. And it is selling pretty quickly, to be honest. So we'd hopefully be able to sell it by the time the Vector launch happens, which would be probably 2 pods, we reckon. Yeah, so back to the point, like something I was talking to Jasper about just European-wide program. We have a lot of people now who are in Europe building PodCubes, and obviously QB50 was massive with the CubeSats to get that really going over here. And the question is like, should we look at some sort of Horizon 2020 or some sort of mega project like Constellation where everyone builds their own PodCube, but it's part of a fleet or something like that? Like what they've done in that program. Is it doable? Does anybody want to do that? Is there enough will to do that? You know, that would certainly help people get funding if we could get a big sort of consortium together, but obviously it takes a lot of time, very unlikely to happen because of the way these things work. But if we don't try, there'll be nothing. I think really getting a program with some description is really the next step for PodCube. There's no dedicated PodCube programs like from like funding bodies or to sign up for these CANSAT programs, these like CubeSat programs, but there's nothing on our standard just now, unfortunately. But hopefully it would come in time. Yeah, I've kind of chopped the top of this graph off, but yeah, essentially this is so yeah, tech specs. So so a general challenge is like people say, oh, that's a cool idea, you build a lot of satellite, but like it'll be crap, right? Because like it's tiny, and then you go, well, there's actually good ways to build PodCubes if you've actually like researched the bits. So this is like a little graph kind of threw together last night in Excel, which is a bit rough, but it was basically to plot against the peak power versus the year. So like what was the best PodCube platform that we could find, and then what's available, and just to get people like people kind of struggle with the whole exponential improvement technology thing. And we've even seen it going from Unicorn 1 to Unicorn 2 on the processors, that our processors like double the speed and half the power consumption. And we're on generation 2, and obviously if you keep on doing that, then you know the capabilities sort of go crazy. And one sort of thing that people usually like to sort of criticize PodCubes with is, well, that's cool, but you got no power, right? So so we developed quite a large deployable solar panel. I'm sure a lot of you've seen, and it's like some of the hinges and stuff, and the cells are out there if you want to take a closer look. So yeah, we're about 20 watts. Depends on the exact figure. I think we're around. I think the official number is 19.96 watts, sort of room temperature generation. Sort of peak on Unicorn 2. Depends, but the averages are around between about 10 and 15, depending on how you work it and how you point it, and the mission and things like that. But certainly we can average about 10 watts, we think, like fairly comfortably, which is not far off like standard 3U missions. I mean, it's kind of 3U with maybe single deployables or no deployables. And people obviously don't realize this because this is like, we've just been doing this in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, so it's fairly new development in the field. Data rates, so we've went about 20x up on data rates. I mean, data rates is one of those easier ones to scale than other things. So we went from about 9K6 baud, about 10,000 bits per second, up to about 200 kilobits per second. So that's Doesn't seem like much, but on a percentage basis, it's quite a lot. And we think actually the Unicorn 2 radio, there's a path to about a megabit per second, depending on your ground setup, and you have to do some custom DSP, but it's possible. But it's kind of, there's enough demand for us to develop that. It's kind of chicken and egg on that again. Payload volume. So Unicorn 2 basically is one circuit board. I don't know if you've seen it, but like it's just integrated. So that means there's a lot of volume for cameras and other things that are bulky. So that's all quite good. I've got pointing now as well. We sort of say about 5 degrees. We'd probably be better than that, to be honest. Depends on what exactly you're doing, but that's sort of our kind of placeholder, sort of cover our ass sort of spec on that one. We think the hardware we have would probably get to about a degree if we really optimized it, and there are ways you can improve that over time if you add more sensors and knowledge and things like that. Use cases, so it's brought up earlier, it's like, this is cool, right? You've got this wonderful platform and like, you've got launch and stuff, but like, what can it do, right? So we've done a few blogs now, so I mean, people can go read them on our website about just generally like, different ideas for your pop cubes and things like that. So we actually we're flying an EO payload on Unicorn 2A. So I don't know if we actually announced that yet, but it's essentially the same lens that GomSpace sell for their NanoEye product. It's a 70mm focal length tele-NASAR thing. So we got one of them fits really nicely in our form factor. And the vector launch will probably be about 15 to 16 meter resolution because we're really low on that one. And in future though, we think you can get around just under 7 meters, about 500 km, if you really optimize the aperture. Like really, basically you'd oversize it. But you don't really need as much length as you've got. But there are basically ways to do it. But I think like 10 meter is doable in the near term if you really stick a big chunky lens on the end of it and design around that. So I think EO has potential there. We have some customers who are interested on the data for that. We're quite interested in different imaging at different times of day and things like that, which currently people can't do because everyone goes to a certain orbit, and something that the vector launch actually opens up quite nicely. IOD, IOV, so like basically in-orbit demonstration, in-orbit validation of technology. This is kind of the one that people are interested from old space mostly, we see. So you're doing some big grand mission and it's going to, I don't know, explore Jupiter or something, right? And you want to convince your boss that like, your widget's going to work. And it's like, well, why didn't you just fly it? I mean, to be honest, the hard bit is really just like getting the price point low enough for these things to make sense. And usually the strong argument is like radiation testing, because radiation testing is really expensive. So it's like, well, why would you spend 200 grand on a radiation test? Why wouldn't you just fly it? Because any radiation test is like not like for like conditions. And then they say, well, so any LEO or something like that would be much closer. But then it's like, that's one of the arguments. And we're seeing a few people who are interested in that, but it's like trying to get the price point attractive enough that, and they have to have enough value in getting heritage basically. It has to be worth more than what we'd sell satellite for and the hassle. So it has to be a really mission critical part or something on a big mission. ADSB, AIS, so there's a couple of people doing this, like Paul's doing this I think, and Yaroslav's doing this. Yaroslav's got his boards out there if you want to go talk to him. So he's probably going to do a demo at some point on Yaroslav. So check out his ADSB receiver, it's pretty cool. AIS, I don't know, I mean this is more Yaroslav's domain, so he might be able to speak more about this thing. It just talks about AIS a little bit, or might mention it. GNSSR, I mean there's a lot of things we don't really know, to be honest. I mean Alba's a small company, we have to focus on the stuff that makes more sense commercially just now, which is like the boring stuff, like platforms, pods, that sort of thing. We don't really get to look at too many exotic payloads, but it's where the university guys can really maybe make some progress, because the whole ethos of universities is research, right? And they can maybe look at something that is more speculative and look at the payloads and really see what can be done. There's like quite a capable platform out there to host these things. Spectrum monitoring. We're trying to convince, spectrum monitoring's been done with SMOG. SMOG guys aren't here, unfortunately, but essentially just looking at different parts of the spectrum. We're sort of pitching this to ESA just now, so I don't think Frank's in, but we're trying to get that put on one of the roadmaps at ESA as a mission, but we don't know if that'll have any success or not. In IoT, so there's a few people, there's actually quite a lot of people looking at IoT in general around the world now. So there's people who are interested in doing IoT for basic Internet of Things, so communicating with low power devices, a lot of that sort of thing. So that's quite an interesting use case. And I mean, these are all kind of basically just like copy and pasted from CubeSat. And it's like, well, can we do it with like smaller constraints? I mean, there probably will be new stuff that people aren't looking at. I'd say probably spectrum monitoring was the first that came out from PodCubes, from the small guys. That was pretty unique. And it's latterly been done on a bigger satellite. Yeah, so just tech challenges in general. I mean, like it's always like a frontier, right? You want to make a more capable platform with better specs, and it's the more people that are developing, mean the specs go forward quicker. So I mentioned this sort of over megabit per second radio. I mean, obviously it depends on what your use case is. For like imaging, you probably want that. For other use cases, you might not need it. Doing hyperspectral, good luck. I mean, it's like kind of one of those ones. We've done an S-band now. We haven't brought it with us because we actually need it in the office and we've only got one. Or two actually, because we need to talk to each other. Thermal design, so our RF engineer and thermal engineer is not here, he's actually just running errands just now, but he'll be in later. The interesting thing is when you put all this power in a little box, it becomes a thermal nightmare. So that's something that we're spending quite a lot of time on trying to get our head around. How do we make sure we don't cook things or freeze things, and where does the heat go, and all that sort of stuff. So there's probably a lot of innovation that we need to look into, and novel ideas for thermal design of these things. And then the other one's separation switches. So this actually came up in our recent, we've done a CDR with ESA, and one of the RIDs they mentioned was the separation between PodCubes. So it's not in the standard. It's kind of one of these ones, like if maybe some academic people want to like research and do some sort of a PhD project. I'm not sure. I mean, like, we don't know whether it's needed or not. We're quite lucky in cluster one, we probably don't need it because we've got 2 or 3 Ps. If we're launching a lot of 1 Ps, that could get quite messy. So maybe it'd be worth further investigation and maybe somebody publish a paper or something on it, because we'd be really keen to learn their readings. The other ones is like the power of the magnets, making sure that they're not too powerful. If we have 6 1Ps in an alba pod and they all have quite strong magnets, there's an incident where a CubeSat from the US and Michigan actually docked with another 1U in orbit accidentally, and we want to avoid that scenario. So maybe like someone researches that and maybe provides like maximum rating of their or even just like some sort of like agreed kind of how do we all work together to get what we want done. Just general more payloads would be nice. So yeah, I don't really have all the answers on the funding front. I mean, it is like quite messy, and it depends on what your project is. We've had a lot of support from ESA, and we're really indebted to them because without them we'd be screwed. There's a bit of local government funding, so we had some local government funding, Scottish Enterprise and a few other people. So they're quite good for kind of the companies, and even we're talking with a lot of councils about different use cases and maybe selling data to them. It's really a mixed bag. I mean, I think commercial, like Emerald said, is the big market that's going to emerge over the next sort of 5-10 years. And within that, there's also the university research funding and things like that. I haven't got on that slide. Military is an interesting one. I was trying to basically get like the military to come to this and like sort of play them off against each other. So it's like, well, the US guys are coming, right? And then like you tell that to the UK guys, and they're like, oh, we're coming too. And it's like, so we have a lot of interest there. We're certainly UK level. There's a lot of interest in the US, but it's kind of more space situation awareness type use case, I think, just now. It's quite interesting. Challenges, yeah. So it's probably going to come up at some point, the Space Bees thing. So Stefano's wrote Stefano's written a pretty good paper on tracking for PodCubes, or Stefano, a few other people at Delft. So it's definitely worth a read. So I was trying to get my head around it, but basically You get radar, so the column on the right there is actually radar cross sections that NORAD, or I'm not sure if it's NORAD produced them or one of the agencies, but basically it's radar cross section of POCUBES. So basically the issue is, if you look at it, it's like 0.02, and then REN for some reason is 0.2499, which basically means it's like half a meter by half a meter, which basically means it's wrong. And turns out Dove4 never actually released, so really REN should be Dove4, and REN on that one shouldn't actually exist because it doesn't have any active tailies. But the long and short of it is they can be totally tracked, and there's a lot of data there to suggest that they can be tracked. There's maybe an argument of how well can they be tracked, but they can be tracked. And it's largely to do with the radar cross-section is actually the key thing. It's not actually physical size, it's the radar cross-section. So maybe, like, I was trying to think, like, what could we do to kind of maybe alleviate the bad press on this front? And like, I've got a lot of journalist requests to talk about this, obviously, because it's like, you know, so how are you guys getting on the POCUBES after the FCC, like, are banning all satellites under a certain size? It's like, yeah, well, we'll see. So maybe radar cross-section. I don't know if there's like maybe a test or something we could impose on people to maybe prove that your radar cross-section is like a certain size. And when people have the tape springs, it actually makes your satellite look a lot bigger in radar, strangely, because it reflects a lot of the energy. And there's different ways to do it. So like if you think about, like, if you're designing a stealth fighter or something, you can make that look really small in radar, and vice versa. You can make something look quite small but bigger. So nobody really thinks about this when they design their satellites. And one of the things, the problems I think the SpaceB guys fell into was they tried to do it for KU band, but I think most of the tracking is currently UHF. So obviously not a great plan there. But the other good news is Space Fence has been announced and is probably coming online later in the year, which is quite interesting, which claims to get down to about 5 centimeters. So that's like a public kind of like claim, maybe even 1 centimeter, they say. So that should hopefully alleviate a lot of the problems publicly about this tracking issue. But empirically, like, all POCUBES are tracked and updated daily, it seems, on the tailies. So not many people know this. Yeah, more businesses. So like, obviously it's cool that Alba's showed up in like a few other companies, and that's great. We don't want to be like the token company, right? I mean, it'd be cool if there were other 50-man companies doing POCUBES. I mean, it's not like we want to be like the only guy in town. We'd rather there's like a community of those companies, and they all kind of feed off each other, and their success is somewhat tied. I mean, obviously we want to be like leading it because we've been doing it for long enough. We want to be proof that, you know, we can be the best at it. But the more companies, the better, really, in our mind. And companies help drive awareness and help build products which make more use cases, and it's a virtuous cycle. So we were the first POCUBE company. We got going about 5 years ago. So we proved you can build a 15+ man company in POCUBES, which, to be honest, was not like incredibly obvious when I started. And obviously we're trying to just like keep the lights on and keep going like any sort of small business. But that's where we're at just now, and we hope that we can grow, you know, much bigger in the future once we get, you know, all our products sort of flowing and proven and things like that. So yeah, just self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people that buy into it, then it becomes easier to get. It's just a lot of inertia when you get these things going, and hopefully we've got momentum now. Yeah, so future of the POCUBE community. So yeah, hopefully I'm doing okay for time. Yeah, cool. Yeah, we basically saw like raised all these things today. Hopefully, like, we can kind of collectively solve them, or Alba can solve some of them, and hopefully other groups can help address some of the other ones. These are the ones that I kind of see as the obvious ones just now. Hopefully we'll be able to deal with them. There'll be a new set of problems we'll probably deal with once we actually fly these things regularly. Yeah, obviously, like Andrew said, a 3U CubeSat, you know, we can actually like get a lot of capabilities into a smaller form factor if you throw enough engineers at it. It's not really, people throw the kind of like the physical limitations at you, and really it's a combination of Moore's law and deployables is really the way you solve it. And it's like totally doable. So just getting that word out there that that's actually not, you know, the case, that, you know, you can't do these things. And it's really density of satellite. People don't seem to design their satellites with density in mind, like power to weight or anything like that. And I think we're probably the first company that said like that's one of our key things. We want to really, even if you chat to people about CubeSat payloads, they're like, we didn't size optimize it, we didn't like do this, we didn't do that. It's like, well, why don't you do that? Because it's really effing expensive to launch it. So, you know, imagine your satellite's a gold bar, right? and then you want to like, so you buy this massive gold bar, and then like your gold bar is a lot cheaper, so you actually have a lot of gold bars, right? It's just mental what happens. So you want to optimize for the smallest gold bar you can, because it's really expensive to launch these things. And if we can be helpful, like let us know. It's like people in the red t-shirts are Alba people, obviously. And I mean, if we can help, it's like not just selling stuff. If we can help in general with introductions or advice or pointers or anything like that. I mean, that's Pokemon related, obviously. Then we're happy to help, and we're really keen for the community to grow. And we've been, this event actually started off as a spreadsheet I was pitching to people of like 5 people I knew in Europe that were maybe interested in Pokecubes, and it's cool to see it grown to. Where we are today, and hopefully it'll grow much more in the future. Just to like show people, obviously, it's like a viable thing to do, and that actually now there's a combination of factors that make these things viable. Where maybe 5-10 years ago that wasn't necessarily the case. And yeah, if you want to email me. Try and get back to you as quickly as I can, I guess. So, cool. Any questions?
Don't laugh, Tom. Hello. Just great to hear that Albert and Delft and Ghost have got together and there's some movement on the mechanical spec. Can you give us any indication of when you think that's and also, I'm interested in like where that's going to be held, because obviously, for me, in terms of like going around doing lots of outreach, it's going to be the most valuable thing ever.
Yeah, I think it's actually on us to get back to the guys, actually. I mean, we've just been kind of mental trying to get everything sorted for this. So, I mean, the idea was to publish it today and have a big kind of unveil, but I forgot the time with Silvana. So, so my understanding is, like, we need to go back with some amends. But, I mean, I don't know where people want to host it, whether Delft or Gauss or someone want to host it. I mean, I think basically the way we're looking at it is people who develop pods should probably, like, talk, and then from that, then people who develop can then take from that standard. And having multiple pods that are all the same form factor is actually the most important thing. Where it's physically hosted, I don't know, maybe just buy a domain for 20 quid. Yeah, I mean, we've got a website. I mean, we don't want it to be too tied to Alba. I mean, it came from the frustration of multiple divergent standards. So, and the way CubeSats do it, obviously Cal Poly's the host of the standards, and operators can deviate at their own risk if they want, but they're as a home, and Delft obviously run the workshops, so that would be where I would probably pitch it as the place for that. But maybe we'll just buy a domain and chuck it on that. I don't know. Like, we need to actually chat.
So are we talking in terms of like weeks and days rather than months?
So the document's done basically. I mean, I think it's actually Manbox because I need to like suggest Alba points on like some details. I mean, all the dimensions are agreed, all the everything high level is agreed. It's more just the weeds, really, technicalities and the wording of certain things. And I mean, I don't know. Like maybe Silvana can maybe talk about it later on or something about. She's kind of leading it mainly. I mean, we're trying to help, but yeah, Silvana has been really sort of driving it forward at Delft side. So, and I think Chantal should be here at some point, hopefully. So, yeah. That does it. Hassel's Silvana, not me. That's like, things will happen. So.
You talk about the permanent magnet orientation on Pokecubes. Is there any critical distance between two Pokecubes to get attached on space?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, so we've got an ICD for AlbaPod now. I mean, I think I've sent people links, and we've not published it because it's very early draft. But people who are interested, like, let me know. I'll send you like a link to it. We don't want to quite publish it until we've got these things kind of ironed out. I mean, I think probably we'll have to have like a sort of recommended. It's tricky with ICD. We don't want to like force too much on people, but also we want to make sure that like, so the other one's drag deployables, right? And I mean, I have to backtrack in this, but I mean, we initially weren't so keen that drag deployables go on our pod because we were a bit worried that like, what if it jams and people are going to be like, well, you guys sold us a launch, didn't deploy. What's happening, Tom, right? So we were a little bit concerned about that. But given the whole space bees thing with the antennas, like in the radar cross sections, it might be that we just have to find a way to make that happen. In terms of the magnet distance, probably the further they are away from each other, the better. So like if someone had them essentially right next to each other on their sallies and hadn't coordinated this is not going to end well. So maybe some sort of, it has to be within the, I mean, we don't really know at this stage. I think it is to be decided. by people who largely are building one piece because they know more than we do. We don't really build one piece, we do 2 and 3s mostly. So I would suggest maybe something in the center of the Sally with a maximum size of magnet. I mean, that's how I would do it. But people have to agree, you know, and like, you know, yeah. Go.
Yeah, thank you. We
No
don't
worries.
have time for the question, but of course Tom is available during the breaks. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Oh yeah. The other thing is we've got a pub tonight. Can you speak? Pub Tierney's Pub from 8:30 in Delft. So everyone's welcome to come along. We just like reserve some space. So like I think it's cash only, by the way. So like it's a nightmare to use cards over here, like it really is. But yeah, come along to that. Everyone's welcome. Tell your pals.
Great.
Yeah. So go.
Great initiative. Thank you. From Picosat Systems from Austria. And he's going to talk about commercial challenges of pocket cubes.
Thank you.
Do you want that? That's Stuart. Yes.
So, my name's Conrad Pearce. I'm one of the co-founders of Picosat Systems, together with Stuart, who is in the audience there. So there's the two of us with the company. Thanks, Tom, who's out there. We pretty much agree with everything that he's said when it comes to the commercialization of pocket cubes. So what I'm going to do today in the next 20 or 30 minutes is talk about commercializing challenges that we have with our company and with pocket cubes from an Australian perspective. Now, it is from an Australian perspective, but I think it's going to be relevant to everyone. So, go ahead and start. So where we are, we like to say, we're Western Australia's first small satellite solutions company. So Western Australia is one of the states of Australia, and in fact, that's about a third of Australians see in that picture, and that's Western Australia. We're in Perth, isolated city, where I think we're this isolated world. We're very happy to be here and actually talk to people in space. We can't tell you how happy we are. And the Australian space industry and economy is interesting, and so is the Western Australian space industry and economy. And I'll touch a little bit on that. For a developed nation, don't laugh at us, but you know we should be a lot further than where we are. But things are changing, and as a nation, so I'll touch on that. So why space? So besides Stuart and myself being, well, I don't want to say space nerds because we're kind of cool, but don't laugh. But that passion or that interest in space is one of the reasons that we have this startup company. Another reason is we want to make space accessible and affordable to everyone. So with the advances in technology, with new space or space 2.0 or entrepreneurial space, there's that ability that we can make space a lot more usable for everyone. So again, I'm preaching to the converted. This presentation and what I talk about in here is along the lines of what I talk about to people in Australia, in Perth, when I'm trying to promote what we do with pocket cubes and with small satellites. So essentially what I'm saying here is kind of the message that I give in Australia. Now there's another reason that we're interested in our company, and that's this. Space is worth $50 billion today, and in a few years' time, well, in a decade or two, almost $1 trillion. So to be part of this economy that's growing very quickly, at the early stages of it is a fantastic opportunity, not just for us as a company, but also for our customers. They're able to get at the early stage and do things that they have the benefit of being a part of all of that money. The satellite industry today, so out of the $345 billion, it's $250 billion. So the satellite industry makes up a huge part of the space economy globally. It's a reason that we're part of this. And with POCUBES, as the previous presenter talked about, there are a lot of advantages there. It's come about from a minimisation of knowledge. And we see that as well. It's not just the money, but it's important to talk about these values when you're talking to customers and trying to convince them that small satellites are the way to go, and then POCUBES are the way to go. Because I guess in Australia we're not so focused on space yet, and so when you talk about it, people don't really know what it means to them from a how's it going to benefit me point of view. It's a very big slide, but it's quite an interesting one, and this just shows what's going on in space. Right now, in those different verticals, you could use satellites for spacecraft. We could do some in-space services, space resources, space energy. There's a whole range of things. So what this slide shows from one of these research companies is that there's a lot of possibility with space today. And again, in Australia, speaking to people, that's what we're trying to portray and show that there's some real value there that they can make a use of. You can see all the logos from companies. There's real companies doing stuff. So hopefully that's a persuasive slide. So I was around in the 1990s. I'm sure a lot of you here weren't, the younger students, but the internet back then had a whole range of possibilities, and space today is like that. And at least when you talk to customers or talk to people in Australia and you make that comparison, a lot of them were around back then, and they can see that, well, look at the internet today and what we have. Space will go that way as well. So let's jump into the challenges that, as a company, that we're facing. So, of course, smaller mass, launch more, constellations, swarmed. It's all been talked about before, and that's all true, and we all believe that. But as I mentioned, we're trying to, in Australia, to show the value of just using space, and particularly satellites for our potential customers and for potential users. Here's a slide that, from another slide deck that I use, and you know, we're using readily available technology. It's cheaper to build, quicker to build. So trying to get that message across. There's a bunch of other slides associated with this slide deck, which talk about small satellites. But this is an example of how we're trying to persuade people back home to get on board and have a look at what we're doing. Now, Andrew talked about this a bit earlier on. He had a whole list of potential applications. Here's a very interesting diagram that kind of breaks down in major categories the types of applications that you can use with small satellites. Now, this is where we start to be able to influence our potential customers by actually showing them what they can do and the value that they're going to get out of it. So up there, you've got things or machine-to-machine learning, machine-to-machine communication. You've got Earth observation-related applications. There's basically a whole range of applications. What are we trying to do when it comes to application? What am I to say to our customers in Australia or potential customers when it comes to applications? Well, Australia's pretty big, as you saw from that first picture, and we have a lot of empty space. So we're trying to focus on things that matter to customers and industry in Australia, and specifically in Western Australia today. So Western Australia is very good at resources. So mining, we do a lot of mining, and oil and gas. Perth is an oil and gas hub, one of the oil and gas hubs from around the world. In recent times, the key prices of both oil and gas and minerals, particularly iron ore, have dived. So it's become a challenge for those industries. So we're looking at seeing how can we help those industries become more efficient, and can we do that through our base technology? And that is one way of, again, trying to persuade and influence our potential customers as to, you know, having a look at it and potentially putting something in place, solution in place that that we can provide them, hopefully based on Pocket Cubes. So we're thinking globally. Satellite solutions, you know, you can apply it to the whole of the world once you've got a constellation up there, but we're acting locally. So oil and gas. So challenges. So a bit's been talked about this morning. Launch. So launch is a challenge, and Vector Space and Alba are helping to make it less of a challenge, and so that is exciting. Options that we have as well, besides dedicated launches, is of course ride sharing, and then the potential for using motherships or space tugs or things like that to go and manoeuvre our spacecraft to where they need to go. So we're talking to different people in the industry to see what they can do for us. So it is a challenge, but it's great to hear from the conversations this morning that that challenge of being able to get our little satellites into space is becoming less so. Testing. Now, I'm not going to move into Stuart's presentation on the technical side, but in Western Australia, we don't really have any good space testing facilities. So we have to fly over to the East Coast to use facilities. So we're trying to see, from a commercial perspective, is there a cost-effective way, commercially, that we can do something in Perth? So that's another challenge we have, and that's how we're trying to address it. We've been speaking to universities to see if we can use different components and test equipment to essentially do the testing that we need to do for satellites. Telecommunications. So with swarms of satellites in space, how do we get the data back home or back down to the ground? So that's a challenge. So we're looking at more ground stations. So Australia, and particularly Western Australia, has very good weather. So we're ideally located to have a lot of ground stations there, especially for satellites in polar orbit. We're also looking at, well, what can we do in space? Can we reduce the amount of data we have to send back to Earth, and therefore make our constellations more efficient? So, you know, can we have some onboard intelligence on those satellites to be about what it is that they're sending back, for example, from an Earth observation perspective? Value-added services. So I talked a bit about just now about what we're trying to do on the satellites. Essentially, with satellite constellations, much like was mentioned earlier on, you're going to get data generated, and that's going to come back. Now, with that data, you're going to have a lot of ability to look into it and look for other patterns. So you can put it through machine learning, artificial intelligence, other types of processing, and pull out even more information than what you can see. For us, we see making what viable more by adding additional value-add services such as processing and analysing data to provide even more information than what's there. Now we come to some of the more challenging parts in Australia. So our legislation regarding space. Of course, that comes about from the various UN treaties that we're all signed to it tonight, and it imposes a lot of regulation on us. Now, what's good at the moment, or in a year or so, this is being reviewed. The federal government says that there is a change coming with space, and stuff like our money. We don't want to be spending thousands of dollars just to launch something that costs way less than that to build. So that's the process. As a result of that, we hope that the risk profile for the insurance that we have to pay associated with what we want to do because of the regulations and the legislation and the treaties down. And so that's a challenge for us as a startup. We're what's the term? Funds free. We don't have a lot of cash. So how we can minimise to get things into space is very important. The good news is we're finally going to get a space agency. We're the last developed nation in the world, and getting a space agency. So in 2 weeks' time, there will be, end of March, beginning of April, there will be official release of information, documentation from the government that will list out how that space agency is going to work. And that will be the start of April. In May, we have our federal budget, where money is planned, and we'll show how much space agencies. It's a really good time to be in Australia at the moment, because things are starting to change, and there may be potential for us as a space startup to make use of what the space agency might do. Now, the space agency is not going to be like ESA, it's not going to be like NASA. It's probably going to be something smaller, but it's great that we've actually got an overall body, a coordinating body in Australia that will hopefully take the space industry and economy forward. So we're really happy about that. And so are a lot of other people that work really hard to get to this point. Australia has, for whatever reason, hasn't bothered with the space side of things. And I think it's the commercial aspects that are helping them to change their mind. So in 2 weeks' time, we're looking forward to it. Perth, that's where we live. Talk a little bit about what we're doing there back home. So Perth is only about 2 million people, and big industries there mentioned before are resources, oil and gas, and mining. With the downturn, because of commodity prices, there's a lot happening in the startup world to see how can we diversify what's going on in Australia, or in Perth specifically. Hasn't so much been focused space, it's just been focused on technology, so we're one of the first space companies to start up there and try and, again, I guess another source of potential revenue and an industry within Western Australia, within Perth. So what's important to us? What are we trying to do? So we're engaging with industry. We really need to talk to industry. It's great to talk about the technical aspects of this. That's important, but for industry, they want to know what they're going to get out of it. How much money are they going to save? How much is it going to cost them? Why will it be better? So we're speaking to industry, all types of industry, not just mining and oil and gas, but we're also trying to speak to others as well, though those are our primary targets, to see what problems they have and what we potentially could solve for them. Now, that list that Andrew put up earlier on in his presentation, which had almost, I don't know, it's like 20 or 30 applications there. Those are some of the applications that we can potentially provide to these companies. So industry is part of what we're trying to do, speaking to them. Australian government. So I mentioned before that things are changing. We're a space agency. Our legislation to change as well to make it cheaper for us to operate in that industry. But with the Australian government and the Western Australian government, we've engaged with them to say, hey, we're a space company, we're here, we're trying to develop our capabilities in Western Australia, and in turn we will have a flow-on effect to the economy and make our state a smarter state. So we're using that, which has been proven, where you have space industry flowing on intelligence back to universities, and then from universities it then goes out into the business world. So we're taking that approach, both at a federal level and at a state government level. Now, when we first put the startup together, I don't think we thought that we'd have to speak to government and try and influence them, but it's one of the many things that I'm talking about here that we have to do to hopefully get these into space and used in a really good way and a profitable way. Universities. We're speaking to universities. Now that's really, really important. A lot of really smart things happen in universities. A lot of really good research happens in universities. And our local universities, so the one I recently graduated from, I'm speaking to them, and we have a relationship with them, and we're exploring with some of their researchers what we might be able to use. So there's, they're doing optical communications, they're doing quantum clock timing in space, they're doing infrared sensors. So these are all technical things, but by understanding the technical that they're working on, we can then, through our conversations with industry, work out how to apply that and create an application that customers hopefully will purchase. So talking about these relationships. International Centre for Radio Astronomy Research. So you've probably heard of the Square Kilometre Array. So a multi-billion-dollar radio astronomy shared between South Australia and Australia. Now, most of it in Australia will be built in our state, in Western Australia. And ICRA is responsible for all of that work. And so we have a relationship with them. They, besides just radio astronomy, want to be seen and are seen as a leader in space. Now, yes, they're research, but generally in Australia, you know, if you're doing something and you're doing it really well, you know, you could be considered a leader. So they want, you know, they're seen as being a leader in space. They want to do things more than just radio astronomy. Of course, things that they want to do will be of benefit to radio astronomy, but they're looking to think a little bit broader and relationship with them, and we're exploring what we can do satellite-wise with them. How can we help them? That's just a picture of the Square Kilometre Array and what it will look like when it's actually built. There's a cursor at the moment. It's called the Murchison Wide Array, which has been built, and this will be coming soon. Just of interest, the amount of data that this is going to generate, we're looking at terabytes of information coming out of here, and they're developing smart software that will throw a lot of that, and I think is important at the antenna, and then send it back to huge data centres in Australia, in Perth. So there's a lot of, I guess, AI software being developed in Perth, in Australia, and I mentioned before that we want to analyse our data as well. So there's a benefit for us there to address the challenge of how do we make our company and PocketQubes relevant to other people by making use of local knowledge that's being built up, you know, and this relationship we have with ICRA, we may be able to do just that and influence our potential customers. So with our relationship with them, we did a zero-G collaboration, which was pretty cool. The deployer that we built is just out there on the table, and you can have a look at it. It's pretty ingenious in the materials that we've used. I'll let you have a look and work it out for yourself. But they took not this one, but there's another satellite out there onto a zero-gravity flight, and this was the result. So we have a picture or a video of a PocketQube being deployed in weightlessness with its antenna deploying. So from a visual perspective, it's a really powerful thing. A press release was released when this happened back in November. So an ICRA PicOSat press release, and it made a few media channels. But it was really important. The relationship that together, PicOSat systems with other institutions can hopefully do some really good things together. And I got to say, it's a really good marketing video. So we like to show that, you know, pull it out my phone and show people, and it's cool. So talking about relationships. So we ran an expert panel of startups, 2 space startups, and space researchers. So really professors at the University of Western Australia working on areas that are relevant, some which I mentioned before, optical communications, infrared sensors, etc. And we ran that together with Woodside, which is an oil and gas company, a huge oil and gas company in Australia. So again, we're trying to, in order to influence people about this, we're trying to do it through relationships and connections within industry, within research and institutions, and it was a good event. But what it really comes down to is, for us as a commercial company, is our business model. So all those applications that we've been about, that Andrew mentioned, that I've showed you in a little wheel diagram at the start, they're fantastic, but we need to make sure that we can sell those and actually make revenue out of it. So for example, from an Earth observation perspective, we're looking at, you know, the cost per square kilometre of imagery. Can we bring that down? How can we bring that down? I mentioned before doing some intelligence processing on the satellite. Maybe that's one way of reducing the amount of images you need to send down while maintaining the high quality. quality. So it's something we're looking at the moment. But the business model is super important, and everyone we speak to, I guess when it comes to money and funding, want to know about what our business model is. So we're in a verifying a few business models, and I think I'm going to continue explore and play with it. And fundamentally, we'll get to a point very soon where, you know, we have this business model where we can just show people this is what we are, this is what we're doing, and have great customers and potential investors. Funding. So what I just mentioned, the business model follows into funding. We're also this is our technology demonstrator. This is about 2/3 of the way done. We need about $100,000 to launch into space. Alba do have a slot available where we're missing $100,000. So from a funding perspective, we're looking at government grants. We're looking at potentially going to look at crowdsourcing, but we're looking at ways of how can we get money for this tech demonstrator, which has no commercial impact, but a good technical impact and a reputational impact for us. That's something we're exploring. Government grants in Australia, there are a number of them, but they're not that easy to get a hold of. There's a number of conditions, and we're exploring that. Yesterday, Stuart and I were over at STech, and we were talking to ESA and their Business Innovation Centre, and we were drooling at the mouth because of all the money that they just throw around to potential space innovation. Will that happen in Australia as a result of the Space Agency? I think probably not to the level that we'd like, but really for us right now, it's up to us to generate revenue or generate the funding that we need to get this proof of concept up into space, as well as to work out the model to get that overall funding coming in. You can bootstrap, but because it's hardware, and to put hardware into space takes money, it's a little bit hard to really bootstrap. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is something we can do. How else are we getting our message out to people about us as a company, about small satellites, about how it might be useful for them? So we're doing a number of things. So we picked up an Innovator of the Year award last year, so an encouragement award, and the funding from that actually got us here today. So we're pretty happy about that. And of course, now that we're here, we're able to look at all the new innovations that are going on with all of you, and we take some of that back with us. We're participating in the Perth startup scene. You know, we're there. We're trying to make sure that we're seen, and we were fortunate enough to receive an award. And that was really, so again, getting in places from a startup perspective. So we're recently on radio. So that's Stuart and I in a radio studio, chatting to the presenters. Now, completely different audience. That audience there aren't just money. They're probably just your ordinary person living a really great life. But again, if we can get that message across, it's useful because you know who they're going to tell and how widely that can. So that was quite a good thing. So we were on a blog recently. So we did I think it was like, what was it, like an hour and a half interview that got chopped down to 30 minutes, which was which the lady who did a really good job. But on that podcast, there is it's us and one of the Mars One candidates. You know, Mars One, that program to send astronauts to space. Yep. How long? A few minutes. Yep. And he's quite well known in Australia. So we're associated with him in the blog means again that we're able to reach even people. So you know, it's reputation by association. There was an oil and gas conference last week, just before I flew out, and I spoke there on space and what we're doing. So oil, you think, well, most people there are interested in drilling and pipelines and things like that, but the applications we talked about are relevant to oil and gas. So we were there at this conference talking about what we could do. At the university, talking about to groups of students about exactly what is possible in space. Again, these guys are going to graduate in a few years' time. They may end up working for us, but even if they're going to spread that space message. there was a networking event, so there's starting to be some space networking events in Perth. So we've spoken there as well. A bunch of different people, both public and industry, that's to those, telling them what we're doing. These are two accelerators or incubators in Australia that are that we've worked with, and in fact, I'm currently going through the Moonshot X accelerator program. It's great. It's a startup program, but we get to engage with people in the space industry. And these are some recent happenings that have occurred in Australia, in Perth, and that is networking events for space. So we're again involved in that. So look, we're basically trying to look at multiple avenues to engage with industry, government, and researchers to get a message across that we have the potential to solve their problems with some solutions. And I did a Google search on Latin, and basically what that means down there, pari passu ad astra, is that moving together to the stars. So basically, in Australia, we're working together with other people to see how we can best solve their issues and promote the Pocket Cube. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much, and hopefully some of that is to where you live.
Unfortunately, there is no time for questions, but you can address for later on. We move to the...
Can I pull this out?
Jasper van Lister from Studio. Okay, talk about
To a couple of things, starting from our history with CubeSats, going to look at our vision on Pocket Cubes, and then ending with picture hardware. So I hope there's something for every one. So how did we decide to develop Pocket Cubes? Well, let's start with the most boring slide, which is the program objective. So the Delphi program facilitates hands-on education. It guides research and development of miniaturized space technology. It performs technology demonstration and provides enabling ability for new space applications by the end-of-end engineering of very small satellites. So here you see Delphi C3, and Delphi C3 was a triple unit CubeSat, or is still a triple unit CubeSat, which is launched in 2008 and was developed as the first platform, as one of the first CubeSats, or the first batches of CubeSats. And it's still operational today, so after almost 10 years. And it's all with commercial off-the-shelf technology. So I'm very proud having been part as a student and later on in the operational phase as a project manager of this satellite. So this was kind of the first platform to demonstrate that these small CubeSats can really work, and it was also our first satellite for TU Delft to show ourselves that we can actually do this. Then we moved to Delphi Next, which is launched in 2013, and Delphi Next was a much more capable platform. It had a propulsion, it had active attitude control, higher data rates, etc. So here we showed really the enabling capability of those small satellites. So 2008 Delphi C3, 2013 Delphi Next, and then what should we do? Well, first let's see what happened at around the launch of Delphi Next, or a little bit before and after. We had a spin-off company of Delphi C3, ISIS, which is residing here in Delft, and they have grown to 100 people, 100 FTE. So they're now the second largest space company in the Netherlands, and they're completely focused on CubeSats. Well, there is Planet and Spire, where we're making constellations, flocks of CubeSats for real operational, commercially oriented missions. There are the big institutes, ESA and NASA, now embarking on scientific missions with CubeSats. And then there are a whole bunch of other companies, upstream and downstream, looking at CubeSats for money doing science. And yeah, basically we are a university. We are and doing the planet. Although I want to, we don't have that kind of investment. They have an investment of $500 million. So we should be looking at something else. So let's take a look at the timeline. So in 1999, the CubeSat was introduced, and it took a few years before the first ones were launched in 2003. So we kicked off our project in 2003, looking at that first launch. And then 5 years later, we launched it. And then immediately we started with our Delphi Next project, which was launched again 5 years later in 2013. And what you see on the blue bars is the amount of CubeSats launched that year. And you see that we launched Delphi Next when there was already steep growth. And although there has been some up and down since, you see that the trend is growing further and further. And only actually launch capability is keeping the numbers lower than they might be. So Pocket Cubes were introduced in 2009 by the same person, Bob Twiggs, who introduced the CubeSat. And here are the Pocket Cubes launched. So again, took a few years before the first were launched, and then it was a bit silent in the years after. It's not exactly the same for CubeSats, but you have to realize that in 2006, the number of 20, 18 of them were never entering into orbit because of a launch failure. So it's first a peak, then sometime nothing, and then hopefully a shifted pattern compared to CubeSats, the same type of growth. So why do we want to enter Pocket Cubes? Well, that's because we are pioneers. With Delphi C3, we were one of the pioneers in CubeSats. And yeah, we want to do that again. And we don't want to run 5 years behind the state of the art like we should be doing with CubeSats. Actually, we're not building complete CubeSats anymore, but the expertise we have in-house we use to contribute to consortia which are building operational missions with CubeSats. We also don't want to build satellites only for a hobby. So yes, it's education, it's hands-on, but we want a bit more than only education. We have a vision, and the vision is many small satellites in a network tackling, for instance, temporal resolution. So maybe a little bit less on spatial resolution or image quality or things like that, but a high temporal resolution. And we see this happening today for CubeSats, with Planet, for instance. But with Pocket Cubes, we can launch, for the same price, we can launch more. So we can launch, let's say, 100 of them on a vector R, or even 3,000 on a VK launcher. Of course, it's not so smart to launch 3,000 on the same launch because they will all be in the same orbital plane. So it's better to buy 30 vector Rs and have these amount of satellites injected in 30 orbital planes. This picture was shot yesterday here on this floor with all those Pocket Cubes. Of course not. But this is how it could look like. However, there are certain conditions before we can move to those big networks of Pocket Cubes. A sustainable growth of the community, growth of the amount of funding, and growth of constellations. First of all, we need to get rid of this picture, space debris. So we definitely need to be ahead of legislation and think how we can be an example to not only our own community, but also to the rest of the space world. And then you need to look at orbital lifetime. We all know about the 25 years. So 25 years after your operational lifetime, you should have gotten rid of your satellites. And for most of the small satellite missions, that means deorbiting in a natural decay. So this is the orbital lifetime of a medium area to mass case, which is currently our Delphi PQ. Of course, you need to draw different lines if you have other ballistic coefficients. It also depends on the launch year, but as you can see, above 600 kilometers, it goes up rapidly, the orbital lifetime. There's, on the vertical axis, there's years. And I didn't even include the 25 years because I think we should stay away from that. Unfortunately, with all the ride shares, all the big primary satellites, they want to go up to 600 to 800 kilometers because they then don't have to do a lot of orbit maintenance. This is something which is currently the case, that a lot of CubeSats and probably also the first pocket cubes in the next years will be launched to those 600 to 800 kilometer orbits. But I hope we get the solution to get rid of that and at least make sure we launch in this segment, so up to an orbital lifetime of 5 years. So then you're talking about 300 to 550 kilometers. But I want to go further than that. I would say we should be focusing on this area, between 300 and 400 kilometers. So I'm happy that the target of the Vector R maiden flight is in between, 350 kilometers. And then we're talking about an orbital lifetime of only a few months. So if your satellite is defunctional, it will deorbit in a few months. Bigger satellites, even below the ISS. But if you, of course, want a mission longer than a couple of months, you need propulsion. And that's what we are also working on. So you extend your lifetime with propulsion, but once your satellite is dead, it removes itself. And you will see this happening, probably then on daily or even hourly basis. Break off your spacecraft, complete burn up in the sky. Nice firework. So going from Delphi Next to Delphi PQ, we like triple units for some reason, so we go from a triple unit CubeSat to a triple unit pocket cube. But the difference in power is going from 8 watts to 0.8 watts, a factor 10. This is not a fair comparison because, as you can see, there's deployables on Delphi Next and for Delphi PQ is not. But even if you would do a fair comparison, then the ratio from CubeSat to Pocket Cube will be 4:1 in power if you take the same solar panel configuration. Of course, we need to talk about money. Launching a triple unit Pocket Cube is about 200,000 euros. Dollars, whatever. And of course, these prices vary a bit, but this is just a ballpark figure. So it's a big bag of money. For pocket cubes, you've seen the figure, and it's coincidence that I have the same as Alba presented. 60,000 euros. Which is a ratio of 1 to 3.5 or so. But I think we should go further than that. I think, and I did some math with what the Vector R costs, we should be able to drive it down to 25K for a triple unit pocket cube. It should be possible, but we need to look at lean surfaces, lean administration, overhead, very lightweight batch deployers. We can get rid of all the side panels of deployers if it's a pocket cube launch only, because there will not be a prime which is in danger. So I think this is possible in the long run, and probably only when you're talking about launching 100 at the same time, not single ones. Of course, it's already mentioned quite a few times, we need useful applications which go beyond technology demonstration. As a university, we'll focus on technology demonstration, but also to think about new applications and to demonstrate parts of it. So we had a few ideas which are still ideas, and we want to investigate in the next few years to bring them, or 1 or 2 of them, to the next level, and hopefully work them out with a bigger consortium. One idea is looking at the gravity field of Earth, and here you see a picture where you can see the differences in gravity around the world, and if you have landslides or whatever, that field changes. So there are big satellites who currently do that, like here Gochi. And my idea is to see, can we make that smaller? Of course, not with exactly the same quality. I'm not want to making the provocative statement that we can squeeze a big satellite in a pocket cube. However, if you talk to astrodynamic people, they, in relation to gravity field monitoring, what you want to do is really track the orbit accurately to see these tiny movements around the perfect orbit. And they see the satellite as a point mass. And a pocket cube comes damn close to a point mass. So you don't need a proof mass anymore inside your satellite, and you don't get all the trouble of having your antennas 2 meters away from the center of mass. No, your satellite becomes the proof mass. And launching can also be useful to measure air density at those lower altitudes. Another idea is to look at the magnetic field of the Earth. This is what it normally looks like, but if you have solar flares, then the magnetic field is changing locally, and you can even get spins of the magnetic field factor at that moment in time. So if you want to measure these very dynamic events, you need to measure at many places at the same time. And maybe that can be done with commercial off-the-shelf magnetometers. So we're going to investigate that, looking at how to reduce the local generated noise and really measure the external magnetic field. This is a slide from Alessandra, who is an expert in radiation sensing. So radiation sensors are being developed all around the world, and ESA has several scientific grade radiation sensors. But the next level could be on a single chip. And especially, again, the quality might not be the same as these bigger ones, but if you have many of them, you can see the dynamics. So basically, such a single chip could be integrated into a pocket cube. Some people might recognize the Netherlands here. This is how the Netherlands typically looks like from above, unfortunately. So maybe, but it's very dynamic, right? It could be the sun could be shining for 10 minutes and then the next hour it's raining. But if you want to catch imagery of the Netherlands, you should be able to look down within that small window of time that there is actually no cloud. Or you might be looking at the clouds itself, because they're very dynamic as well. And you need a high temporal resolution, not one global image every day, like Planet Labs wants to do with CubeSats, but having so many pocket cubes, maybe thousands or tens of thousands, such that you can do it from minute to minute. Another thing is temperature, also dynamic throughout the day. So temperature mapping with thermal imagers, like you have these handhelds which you can point at your house and see where your house is leaking, or look at people to see if they have fever or not. Maybe we can use them as is or with slight modifications to look down to Earth, many at the same time, to make real-time global temperature maps. Next one. Again, the Netherlands. Anybody recognize where this picture comes from? Yeah, so I'm going to be very, very provocative now. Of course, I'm not going to say that Tropomi, which is an instrument like this, very, very well-calibrated, science-grade, perfect absolute measurements, that you can integrate it in a pocket cube. Absolutely not. However, if you look at the lens opening, there are many lens openings of Tropomi, it's about 4 centimeters, which at least would fit in a pocket cube, but the optical train doesn't. So we should definitely not try to get the same type of quality of this, like this image. This is, by the way, air pollution at the Netherlands. So we are one of the most polluted regions in Europe, or maybe even in the world. Delft is actually very, very bad. So you're smoking now about 8 cigarettes this day, and tomorrow again, unfortunately. So, but again, this Tropomi is imaging this every few days around the globe. And I think with Pocket Cubes we can complement that by measuring, for instance, every 5 minutes or even real time with moving the camera a bit on certain regions of interest, and then see how clouds disperses. So the dynamics. We don't need perfect absolute measurements. We don't need very high signal to noise ratio. We might just be looking at a few spectral lines to only focus on carbon, nitrogen dioxide. But it's the dynamics we are interested in. Just to give you an example, I got a message 2 days ago on my phone, like an automatic emergency message that said, warning, very big fire at Moerdijk with significant amount of smoke, close all doors and windows immediately and visit some kind of web link. It's going automatic, unfortunately. Go back. Okay, so this was the fire, nothing there, but it could be toxic, right? I have a very old house and it's very leaking. I have 2 small children, so I wanted to know, is this very bad and is it going my way? Should I go to my bunker or not? So I looked at the internet, couldn't find anything real time on wind direction, but I found a picture which was originating from Breda, and this was what the cloud looks like. So I'm living Dordrecht, which is a city about half an hour away from here. This was where the fire was, and this is where the picture came from. So I knew I was safe. My colleague Stefano is living in Breda, so he was choking. He's now limping a bit. But I mean, of course, this is a creative solution to find out where it is, but it would be much better if we have those data real time, and that wouldn't even have a message if it wasn't so urgent for me, or if I could look at the internet and see, hey, I'm still safe. I don't have to keep off all windows. So how do we want to develop Pocket Cubes at TU Delft? Well, we took 5 years for each satellite. In the future, we want to take 1 year or even half a year for each satellite. So we have, we all know this development approach from definition to operation. We want to do it iteratively and have these every 3 to 6 months. And then launch also every 12 months. So now about the status and design of the PQ, show hardware. Last year I spoke on an interface. We've defined our own PQ9 interface, and we still need to release it publicly because we haven't tested out the data protocol extensively, and I don't want to update public too often. If you're interested, you can approach. We can give you a pre-release version of this. The whole message here is it's one of the options. You should, as a developer, choose what you want. PQ9 is very lean, but comes at the price that your options are not even limited. You don't have options anymore. The data bus is RS485, and you can choose between 4 different power distribution lines. And the only reason we have 4 is to limit the amount of current per line. But we even try to put type options in such that it's really clear and incompatibilities are not of like we saw happening very often with CubeSats. You cannot buy 2 CubeSat subsystems from 2 different vendors and expect them to work together. Probably they'll blow up. They have the same connector. So the radio below the final PCB, which still needs to be populated in this picture. Above are the breadboards. We're using a system chip radio, which has many different modulations. Go currently for GMSK. LoRa, for instance, would support it. It can go up to 300 kilobits per second. It's on VHF up, UHF it's cheaper, but since we have 400 watts, that's not a big issue. 0.25 to 1 watt of transmitter power, and we'll limit probably to 2 kilobits per second. You can do more, but we should look at, and we're in the UHF band. We don't want to occupy too much bandwidth. So here is an DN board, which in this quick and dirty you can see here. So we have two deployed antennas, and they will be receiving air constrained with a Dyneema wire, which will be burned through once successfully in orbit. Ground segment have our own. We have many as well around the globe, or other colleagues, the Pocket Cube and CubeSat developers contribute in the collection of data. And then we have a central server and database, and of course users which can look at innovative database approaches there. The power distribution simplified. We have solar cells, a couple of them, maximum power point trackers. It all comes down to a variable voltage bus connected to the battery, and this variable voltage bus is distributed, protected distribution as is. So regulation, if needed, this way save potential conversion steps, because everything is over and keep losses as minimal as possible. We also have a system reset line, which can be used, for instance, from the radio and high priority commands, which says reboot, and then it doesn't data bus might be stuck for whatever is, or the computer might be stuck. So this is the upside of the battery, and at sides there are of connectors. These are spring-loaded connectors. I'll show later. So we want to save a lot of money, or save a lot of money, save a lot of time in the assembly and integration, and we want to get rid of all kinds of loose cables. So this spring-loaded connector connect to the side, also PCBs. This is then the other side, just two loose batteries still on top, but these are batteries from e-smokers, giving us 1.5 amp hours of capacity. Next are solar panels. Actually, these are not solar panels, these are our shoulder panels. So also a nice going to, it goes to PCBs to be a rich structure, no need for more. And on the back, we have our PowerPoint trackers. So it's not on a anymore, but it's kind of cellularized. So each panel will have its own maximum PowerPoint tracker. You can even experiment with different types of solar cells at each problem, since it's all standalone. This is a flat set, so here is where we test our systems for now, before we are going to integrate everything. And I told you before about this. So this is a bit how it looks like. So, and a side panel, and where you have these spring-loaded connectors pushing against the apples. No, produced and integrate. This is where we are now. We are also advanced components, which be on our first Delphi PQ or not. Since we work iteratively, we want to advance step by step and just see whenever something new comes available, we can test part of the next baseline. Here we see first a reaction with the smallest reaction in the world up to now. It consumes 10 milliwatts. And is the hermetically sealed because we didn't want to remove the lubricant and replace it for a vacuum grade lubricant because that the power consumption. So we wanted hermetically sealed and so still some work to be done. Propulsion, I will be very short on the presentation, but we're working on several types of propulsion. Peak power is quite temporary acceptable, and as you can see, it's lightweight with less than one unit of a pocket cube. Maybe in the future it can be even smaller, or we can go for more propellant, because in the end you want delta V. If you want to go low orbit, keep your orbit, maintain your orbit there, delta V is needed. About 0.3 meter/second per milliliter of water. And it's also very nice to have water as a propellant. So it's a resistor-jet, and for instance with 100 milliliters, which could easily fit, we would have 30 meters per second, which could extend your lifetime from 350 kilometers altitude by about half a year or a year. You get more if you want. So future, we might want to innovate more and more on the other panels, sensor, magnet, video, transceiver, etc. This is the further future, but the whole idea is that you can have an assembly line and let your thing produced as cheaply as currently mobile phones are being produced. My presentation. There have been a couple doing thermal analysis. Inside the satellite it has a range of about 40 degrees and ground to -5. So we're working on that with respect to the batteries. We have thermal protection on the batteries, so we're safe on that side. However, I want the whole range to shift a bit higher. So we're looking also at the color of PCBs. We now choose to go for black, which is a bit better. What we certainly will not do is having heaters on board, because the power is so low, it doesn't make any sense to do that. So no active control.
So even if the cold, even if the cold
case?
Even, yeah, in the cold state where the thing is shut off, the sun is not shining and everything, you get up to 5 degrees?
Minus. Yeah. But that's at this moment in time. We work very iteratively, because if our configuration change, we do rerun the thermal model.